Jeff, give me your best guess as to where we go from here between the U.S. and China, given everything we've heard over the last 48 hours or so.
Well, I think the market's making too much of the call that may or may not have happened between the U.S. and China. Clearly, Trump didn't participate, Mnuchin didn't participate, Lighthizer probably didn't participate. So if anything, there's something at the working level. But really, we Americans assume that it's all about us, and you really need two sides to make a deal. And from the Chinese perspective, they want to put the substantive discussions on pause until October 1st. They are preoccupied with their domestic celebrations of the 70th anniversary of the People's Republic, which cannot include mention of foreign concessions. And they can't make concessions while there's unrest in Hong Kong because that would encourage the protesters further. So I think beyond October 1st, there may be a narrow window between that time and the Iowa caucuses in February 3rd when the U.S. presidential election gets into full swing. There's an APEC meeting in November, and there is a narrow possibility that if both sides really want to make a deal, they may, in that window, be able to do something, because after the campaign season gets really started, I just don't see a deal before the election.
Yeah, well, there are plenty of people who agree with that. Sean, you're a China hawk.
Right.
Is this the way you would go about prosecuting, sort of trying to get a good deal from China in terms of trade?
I would not. And even if we get a deal, what does it mean? We're dealing with a Leninist dictatorship that doesn't let its own people vote or access Facebook. Why would we expect them to treat us fairly? It would not be up for a congressional vote. There'd be no means of enforcement beyond other tariffs. I think we get too hung up on doing business with mainland China. Trump orders companies out, but he doesn't give them options. Why did we leave TPP, which was sort of a trade version of NATO, against Beijing? Why is he picking fights with Vietnam and India? I'm glad we have this apparently in principle deal with Japan. I haven't seen the details. I'm sure it's not what we would have gotten had we stayed in TPP. But Trump seems to be starting fires everywhere. I'm with him on China, but we shouldn't be fighting with our friends at the same time.
So you're with him on the overall goal, but the execution is not what you'd hope.
I'm with him on a reality check for China. I think it's been a generational shift into China. When U.S. manufacturers offshored production to other Asian countries in the 60s and 70s, we eventually followed those suppliers into mainland China. This is part of an Asia story, not just the China story. So the genie is out of the bottle there. But I think we need to be giving company options around China. Tariffs, I'm willing to be convinced, but forced import substitution in a developed economy rarely, if ever, works. And at the very least, Trump has to be honest about who's paying the tariffs, because it's not Beijing.
But so what do you tell a company like Apple or Procter & Gamble? There's 1.4 billion people in China. It's the hottest growth market for so many American companies. They'd probably want a better playing field. They probably wouldn't want to have to deal with intellectual property theft and forced joint ventures and all these other issues. And yet they need access to that kind of growth. So what does a Tim Cook do? What does a CEO of a multinational company do that's there?
Well, Trump loves Tim Cook because he always calls him directly and doesn't hire expensive lobbyists like me. But, you get what you pay for. If you are willing to do business in a country that doesn't let people access Twitter, go to church, vote, or speak freely, I think you kind of deserve what you get. You should be looking at other options around China, and if things happen there, don't come crying to us. You sort of make the bed you lay in.
Well, I'd love to get your thoughts, Jeff. I mean, there seems to be a great interdependence at this point between the Chinese economy and the U.S. economy, not necessarily just measured in the goods that go back and forth between the two.
Yeah, truly, China is the greatest potential growth market for many American companies. China is the second largest economy in the world. There is no way we cannot do business with them. There's no way that we can decouple as much as we would like to. So we need to find a way forward. We can do that through a small deal with purchases and marketing openings, or press forward with the industrial policy. But the tariff policy is coming to its logical end. We cannot impose tariffs ad infinitum. And I would predict that the next phase will involve us looking very carefully and studying our access to the Chinese market and imposing reciprocity on the Chinese, limiting the access that they have, and trying to equalize the deal that we made 20 years ago when China came into the WTO, when China was a developing country, and make China live up to the standards and responsibilities of a developed country, which is where they are right now.
Jeff, you and Sean both, I think, are advising corporations here, getting paid to do so, of course, how they should do business or navigate the current field. So what are you hearing from senior management at some of the companies, Jeff, that you are talking to about how they should approach China and what they should be thinking about? And are some of these CEOs or senior managers throwing their hands up in terms of how they should go about navigating this?
Well, I think the biggest problem, quite frankly, is on the American side. We have a president who is a short-term tactical thinker who is trying to get a win in each and every conversation and lacks underlying principles or long-term values. We need to get some stability on the American side. That's the biggest problem that they have. I think coming from the Chinese, there's the threat of retaliation. We have not seen the kind of retaliation that China is yet capable of and that President Trump underestimates. The Chinese can do a variety of things to block American firms, and the discrimination that we see now will increase significantly.
I mean, that's always been a worry at corporate America. I haven't seen it yet. Sean, what about the rest of Asia? I mean, what is the relationship looking like now between South Korea and China, Japan and China? Can China make up for lost business by getting closer to other trading partners?
Well, China is pursuing its own RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, which is sort of a brick-and-mortar, low-level TPP coupled with its Belt and Road Initiative into the Middle East. China's annoying a lot of people in the neighborhood, which is why it's so sad that we've picked fights with our friends. Vietnam is standing up to them in the South China Sea. Japan has the dispute with them over the Senkaku Islands. South Korea is still reeling from Chinese sanctions over putting a U.S. anti-missile defense system. And obviously, Taiwan is totally going against the mainland. And Trump, thankfully, has been very strong for Taiwan against Beijing. So China's making a lot of enemies in the region, but I think a lot of countries are no longer sure where the U.S. stands. So they're hedging their bets. They're making their own side deals with China just in case Trump follows through on his America First principles and leaves Asia overall.
Where does that put Europe?
I don't think Europe's that relevant. I think Europe is kind of yesterday's news.
It's a pretty
largest
big
economy in the world.
Well, in terms of
yesterday's
geostrategic national security in Asia, I'm happy to see France doing sail-throughs in the Taiwan Strait and South China Sea. And finally, Britain is saying something about Hong Kong. Remember, Britain did not give the people of Hong Kong democracy when they had the chance. Christopher Patton tried to do it at the last minute, but Europe is pretty absent on countering China and Asia, and finally they're saying something.